If you're starting out as a beginning real estate investor or a wholesaler, you are probably wondering, hey, do I have to put up any money for down payments or deposits? And how does it work? And how much do I put up? And if I'm wholesaling it, how much do I ask the buyer in terms of a deposit? Well, the answers to those questions will be answered here for you today. And today as well, I have a special guest, Mr. Alex Youngblood, the owner of the largest wholesaling group on Facebook here. And we're here together. I was in Orlando and he followed me to my house.
I just had to.
Yeah. And so that's what we're going to be discussing here today. And he is here to give us input to maybe potentially dispute some of the things that I'm going to tell you. I don't know if he does dispute them.
You want me to be controversial?
No, we can always edit your. If I don't like your answers, I will edit them out.
That's
and I will
the magic of YouTube.
And yes, exactly, the magic of YouTube. And I have my notes. I'm looking at my phone. I'm not trying to be rude or anything like that. But we do want to cover certain things. And so again, just to make sure that we're all on the same page here. When we're talking about earnest money deposit, right now we're talking about wholesaling. And wholesaling is the art of going out and finding below market properties, below market real estate, and going out and putting those properties on the contract, and then going out and finding a buyer so that then we can take our contract, sell it to that buyer, and make an assignment fee, which could be anywhere from a couple $1,000s to 10, 20. My biggest assignment fee ever was $98,000 for an assignment fee. What was yours? What's your biggest assignment fee?
I think it was $78,000.
$78,000.
You got me beat.
All right. Well, we're in Miami. Everything is more expensive down here. So you're in Virginia.
I mean, do you have to have a minimum of $70,000 to make it worth it?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, do you even have electricity in Virginia? I think maybe. I don't know. Okay. Enough nonsense. We're gonna try to keep the nonsense down to to minimum. Okay.
All right.
All right. So let's talk about now So there's a couple things we need to make sure we're on the same page. So we are going to go out and find a seller. We're gonna put that property on a contract. So that is one part of the process. And then when we sell the property, that's the second part of the process. Each one of them is gonna require a deposit. And so that's what we're gonna be discussing here. So let's discuss the first part of that, which is the seller side. All right. Now I'm going to tell you, I have a few things here that I wrote down, Alex. And so again, feel free to dispute that. Let's talk about the amount. So we are in the process of putting a property on the contract because we're thinking, it's a good deal. So we want to put it on the contract. So now what is the amount? The note that I had here to talk about was the fact that there is no set amount.
No, there is no set amount.
However, I would say that, and you tell me if you agree or disagree, if we're dealing with a real estate agent, if we're putting a property on the contract with a real estate agent versus a private owner, typically with a real estate agent, we're going to have to put up more money than we would with a private seller. Would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, because that's going to be based on the amount of the purchase price that you're putting the property under contract for. So if it's a $20,000 property, you might be able to get away with $100, but if it's a $200,000 property, that's a higher offer, so you are going to need a higher amount of earnest money typically. So private seller, we just tell them, hey, this is just a modest amount just to make the contract legal.
Okay, so then now what do you typically, if you're dealing with a real estate agent, let's say typically I would think you have to put up at least $500 minimum, depending on the purchase price, but likely $1,000, a couple $1,000s as a deposit.
Yes.
Right. And so then with a property owner, I mean that deal that I did that I made $98,000. That was a $100 deposit. Sure. I never put up any more money than that with the seller. Right. So with the sellers, if you're dealing with a private seller, then you have more flexibility around that.
Yes.
Right. So now let's talk about when do you put up the deposit when you present the offer, or do you put up the deposit once the contract is fully executed?
So most contracts, in fact, I believe your contract states that at the end of the inspection period or at the time that's completed is when the earnest money is due. So
That's my trick. You ruined my
You
trick.
frankly-
I had that note to tell them
Oh,
that I
I
was going to
blew
say that
it.
to the end
I
as a special thing, and you
blew it.
blew the whole thing.
Oh,
Okay, but it's
man.
okay because you didn't know that. You didn't know that.
I
was
didn't
gonna
know what your notes were.
That I was going to give you guys a sliver of, oh my gosh, you're going to wait to the very end to watch this, but now I have to think of something else to the very end.
well, you better
right.
start thinking.
So there's two options. You can either there's three options. You can either give the deposit at the time that you make the offer. You can give the deposit
I
once
never give the deposit to the seller.
Right, but that's one option. Well, no, you said give it to the seller.
I never give it.
Right, but we're talking about two things here,
Okay.
different. So we're talking about just the time when you give the deposit. When you give the deposit, you typically either will give the deposit at the time you present the offer, at the time that the contract is accepted, fully executed. Fully executed means, in real estate terms, means when the buyer and the seller both have signed, right? And or at the end of the inspection period. So I would say we both agree that we don't do it neither of us do it at the time that we present the offer. We don't do it when the contract is accepted. We do it when the inspection period is over, right? So typically when we put a contract together, we have a time period where we're going to be able to have a due diligence period with the property. So once that due diligence period is over, say 10 days, at that moment, then we're committed to the contract unless we cancel it. So we've put in our agreement that, hey, the deposit is due after the inspection period. So even if you're putting up a $100 deposit, you can just put that deposit up after the inspection period is over, right? So typically 24, 48 hours after the inspection period is over.
Yes.
Okay. Now the other thing that sometimes I do is, let's say that the owner wants a higher deposit. The owner says, I want $2,000. Then you can do is say, look, I'm going to put about a nominal deposit now, say $100, just to put the contract in place. And then when the inspection period is over, if everything is good, then I'm going to go ahead and put up an additional deposit of $2,000. Now
Okay.
we're going to get into on the second part of this video, but when I do that, then typically I'm going to ask the buyer to put up that money.
Okay.
So is that something that you've ever done before?
Not really. No.
Okay. See, I taught you something
We
today.
always go with one EMD and leave it at that, and it goes with the title company, and we again leave it at that. What you just said, I mean, we can make a cool little phrase for it called the escalating EMD.
Escalating EMD.
You like
Escalating EMD. I don't like that. I
You
have
don't
to
like
think about
that? That's
Yeah.
what you were doing. You were escalating your EMD.
I don't like
I'll give
it.
you another.
Maybe I don't like it because I didn't think of it. So what I'll do is I'll tell you that it's a bad idea now, and I'll come back to you 3 days later with the same idea, slightly variation, and it'll be a great, amazing idea because I thought of it.
Maybe, yeah.
Right, exactly. That's the the other thing that we put in the contract when we're putting our deposit with the property owner is we make that the deposit is the only form of liquidated damages that the seller can have against you. So that if something happens, you forget to cancel the agreement or you're not able to close on it, then the seller has the right to sue you. Anybody has the right to sue you for specific performance. However, I just noticed your laptop screen is horribly dirty. My
It's
gosh,
actually
how could you-
not. It's like just there's something funny about it.
Interesting. Okay, never mind. I'm not going to
You
judge
might
you
need
on
to
that.
edit that.
No, we're not going to edit. We don't make any edits on this video. Okay,
all
so make sure you got your stuff together because we're not going to make any edits. So the deposit is only liquidated damages, right? I actually thought of that the goal should be that no matter what happens, even if a man comes through and through the window and crashes through, we do not edit the video.
Okay.
So if you pass,
That's a rule.
Yeah. So if you pass gas right here,
I'm
we're not going to edit the video.
Not going to do that.
Right. Okay. So we talked about the seller. So the seller, anything we talked about, no set amount with the seller. We're going to be put up the least amount that we can, right? Reasonable amount. We want the deposit due after the inspection period. So we never present the deposit upon the presenting of the contract or when it's executed. We want to do it at the point of once the inspection period is over. The deposit the deposit is the only means for liquidated damages. Anything else that you can think of when it comes to the seller side?
To the seller side, the main thing is that the EMD just makes the agreement legal. That's it.
Right.
It doesn't need to be a certain amount. Doesn't need to be given directly to the seller, but it's just something that makes the contract legal. It's not something we need to make a big deal about.
All right, that's perfect. So then now let's talk with the buyer. So now we have the contract, we have the property on the contract at this point with the property owner. Now we have a contract in hand, and then now let's say hypothetically in our example, we have a deposit of $100 with the owner. So now we're going out into the world. We find a cash buyer that says, "Oh my gosh, this is exactly this type of deal I'm looking for. I want this deal. Please give it to me." And then you are gonna go ahead and sell your contract to them. So let's say that in this example, we have a property on the contract for $100,000 and we're gonna sell it for $25,000. So we're gonna sell it for $125,000. Now, the deposit on the buyer, what are you gonna ask? In that scenario, don't look at my nose.
Oh, well, I'm cheating.
That's so rude. What are you gonna ask? If you're doing this deal, what are you gonna ask for the deposit from the buyer? What are you gonna ask?
Okay,
how much money
so
would you say?
From the buyer coming in?
Yeah.
I'm good with 1,000. A lot of people, if it's somebody that you have not used in the past, would use 2,000.
You know, in South Florida, you can't get away with that. The people walk away from $1,000. You know, barely pays gas for a Lamborghini down here.
Yes,
so,
that's true.
Yeah. So that's interesting, 1,000. But is it somebody you know or you don't know as a buyer?
A lot of times we're working with people that we know.
Okay.
So
that's different. I mean, if you know somebody that's
a brand new person, we like to get $2,000.
Yeah. Typically, if it's somebody you never dealt with before.
Yes.
How much money would you say?
2,000 is fair.
Okay. So to have a little bit of a different perspective, the EMD depends on what you got on the table. So let's say that I got a deal that I've been trying to sell for 2 weeks. I'm at the last rung of at the last leg, and I can't find a buyer. And the buyer comes up and says, "Hey, I want the deal, and I'm only going to put up $500 because that's all I put up. And if you don't like it, tough luck. But if that's the only thing I got right there, then, and by the way, when I do this, I always feel like Donald Trump. Well, if that's the only thing I've got, then I'm going to take it. But if I have a good property, I'm going to make good money, and I want to make sure that, hey, look, I'm going to make $25K on the deal. I want to make sure that I don't get a buyer that cancels on me on the last minute. So typically, I try to get like a $5,000 deposit.
Wow.
You know, and now they're going to put up.
Roll.
That's how we roll down here. Okay, we got to put the vice grip on the buyer. So and now that deposit, if you get a $1,000 deposit from the buyer, do you have them give it to you or do they give it to the title company?
They give it to the title company.
Same thing as me. They give it to the title company. Now, another thing that I do, let's say that if we have a, oh my God, the alarm, I can't, my alarm. So if we have a, now I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
You were talking about giving the deposit to the title company instead of to you.
Right. So let's say that we have a contract with a buyer. Now, technically, if I have a contract with a seller for a $100 deposit, but I have a contract with a buyer for $5,000, there's a little bit of separation there because what if the deal falls out? Does the seller get the $5,000?
Does the seller get the $5,000?
Yeah.
The seller doesn't get the $5,000,
Right.
because the $5,000 was to
right.
you.
So, but the title company can construe that a couple different ways. So what we do in the assignment is we split it up, and let's say if I have a $100 deposit with the seller, and I'm going to ask the buyer for $5,000, I'm going to ask the buyer for $5,100, and I'm going to put on the assignment that $100 goes toward the original contract with the seller, and the $5,000 goes toward the liquidated damages on the assignment.
So maybe that's your little trick.
Yeah,
there
my little
that you were
trick.
coming up with.
Because we got to put the vice grip here when we're. Isn't that a derogatory?
That's very.
I think that's
strong language.
Yeah, it's very strong language. Yeah, it's not like this, but
no,
it's
not like that.
yeah. Okay, look, I try to make these. Listen, I'm making videos for you. I have to have some fun doing this because otherwise it's going to be all drab, and so I have to keep it.
I think I'm wondering if they're wondering why Alex Youngblood is in so many of your videos lately.
Yeah, well, he's visiting here. And in my house, he's staying here.
So
we're giving him the Cris Chico Airbnb. We're giving him the Cris Chico Airbnb treatment, and we're waiting on you hand and foot. It's really I don't know. Hopefully you'll leave earlier, sooner rather than later, because it's very taxing. Yeah,
some videos.
Yeah, that's his pay. That's his payment for that. So then now. That was the thing. So the buyer, bottom line is that, just to recap for everybody here, we put the property in the contract in our scenario for $100. We go out and we find and we put the property in the contract with $100 deposit due after the inspection period. We go out and we find a buyer. During that inspection period, the buyer says, I want it. Then we are going to get a amount of money from the buyer that is greater. Like, we're not going to ask for $100 deposit from the buyer. So you typically would ask for an amount greater. But again, if you're dealing with somebody you already know, then you're willing to be a little bit more lax on how much money, because you know they produce. But if it's somebody that, let's assume that you're starting out brand new in the business, you don't know anybody, then you want to get as big as a deposit you can from the buyer. And also you want to make that deposit non-refundable. So the buyer has seen the property, they're willing to take the property as is, and they're going to make that deposit to the title company as a non-refundable, what we call hard deposit. All right, hard deposit meaning that there's no contingencies or anything like that. And so what I would recommend is just ask the buyer, we need a deposit on the deal, how much you can put up. Because sometimes the buyer might say, oh, I'll put up $10,000. And you're like, okay, we'll take 10 grand. Perfect. Now, if the buyer says a lower number, then what you would say is, well, typically the deposit that I require on my deals is $5,000. Now, if the buyer says, oh my God, I don't want to put that much money, well, you're crazy. You're like a communist. Why are you asking for this kind of money? Then you say, look, Mr. Buyer, let's do this. This is our first deal together. And really, frankly, I want to do more and more deals. However, I just want to make sure we're on the same page and you just don't disappear and wake up tomorrow and decide that, I don't want this deal. And I'm leaving off to Bermuda to go and hang out and do all kinds of crazy stuff and forget about your deal. I don't want that to happen, okay?
No.
So what we're going to do is this first deal, we're going to go ahead and do it $5,000. However, on the next deal after that, we can certainly do less. Typically, I can do $2,500 for repeat customers.
Yes.
And now you ease it. But the first time, especially if you got a big assignment fee, you got to protect it. You got to make sure that the buyer thinks twice about backing out on the agreement. So then now we've got the buyer to put up the deposit, and we say, hey, the deposit is always more than the deposit that we have with the seller, and then now and we make the deposit so that the liquidated damage is $100 for the seller, and the rest of it is for us. And I think that about covers the earnest money deposit. So in this video here, we've covered exactly what you need to know to make sure that your deals stick, both on the seller's and the buyer's side. You got a little bit of extra nonsense with this video, but it all comes free when you're here with Cris Chico and Alex Youngblood.
Sure.
And you might want to check out some of the videos that I have here, or might be by him, I don't know, somewhere around here, and check them out because they're really, really good. And as always, you want to make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, make a comment, because again, if you come here and you watch a video and you don't make a comment, you don't give me a like, you don't hit the notification bell, then it's like going to the buffet, eating all the food, and just walking away from the restaurant and not eating anything. Somebody's going to come after you. Maybe him, maybe me, someone. So you don't want that to happen. It's very rude, and it's just not good etiquette. Would you agree? Just be polite. Watch one of the videos here, take a look at that, and we'll see you in the next one.